Hey again, 1B peeps. I had to start this over because I said 1 beeps the last time I tried to do this. This video, I'll talk a little bit about fallacies and why they're important and why we should be able to recognize them and what they actually mean when we see them in writing and when we perhaps, hopefully accidentally use them in our own writing and speaking. And we should try to stay away from them if we want to keep our ethos level up, if we want to keep our credibility and our believability and our trustworthiness up. You know, if you ever talk to somebody and, as soon as they start talking, you're like, this person's always so full of BS. They may be using fallacies. They may not even know that they are using fallacies. Quick little definition for you. A fallacy is an argument that relies on faulty or manipulative reasoning. In other words, it's not really doing the basic foundational work to convince you of something. It's relying on tricks or mental slips that distract and keep you off of the main issue. It's kind of like, in sports, there are certain rules. And if, somebody violates the rules, it's a foul, the ref blows the whistle, there's a penalty. Fallacies are kind of like the fouls in the argument and persuasion world. Here's a dirty dozen set of fallacies. It's not the only ones, but it's a pretty good list. Now I'm going to go ahead and put this full PowerPoint on the module as well. So if you want to click on some of these links here, have at it. You can get more information. I'm not going to go through all these right now. I'll just do them one by one. Now, a couple things you should know about fallacies. One is that some are just bad forms of arguments that could be pretty good, like a lot of those classical appeals we've talked about already, logos and ethos and pathos. But there's something wrong with them somewhere. And sometimes it's hard to tell if something is one fallacy or another. It may fit into more than one category. Just like an appeal may have an element of logos and ethos in it, for example. Now let's just jump right into them. First one is hasty generalization, and that means drawing a conclusion or an inference from insufficient evidence. And there's a Latin term for this too, quid hoc ergo propter hoc. I don't care if you know that. If you like using fancy Latin terms, you can use that. This is sometimes also known by some other words now, but by other names too, but hasty generalization is fine. After my son had his vaccine, he developed autism, therefore the vaccine caused autism. Now that's generalizing really hastily based on having a vaccine. Just because something happened doesn't necessarily mean that the thing before it caused it or not. It takes a lot more argument and proof to get to that point. Now, overly emotional appeals really use emotion way over the top. They're dialing it all the way up to 11 to distract readers. And that way they can't, focus on what might be other weak parts of the argument. Like, remember that Purina ad? I know I am a good dog. Oh, that one's designed to really pull at your heartstrings. With the sad music and the sad dog face and stuff. It's really working overtime. So it should make you feel suspicious. Scare tactics are also really popular in overly emotional appeals. Now, if you look at the next page, you're going to notice a sad or scared child. Think about where your eyes are going when you look at this ad. Too many right here. How many vaccines will your child get? So in other words, seeing this sad little child's face is going to, elicit an emotional response. But does it really stack up with the evidence we have against vaccines? That we have about vaccines. In general, vaccines tend to be extremely safe for the vast majority of the population. And having those vaccines is way better than getting a lot of these things right here. Hepatitis, for example. rhinovirus, etc., etc., etc. But again, you can feel the emotional appeal in those sad little eyes. Now, an either or choice or a false dilemma makes things into one of two choices that really aren't the only options in the world, but they want you to think that way. It's got to be this or it's got to be that. And in real life, there are often more possibilities than that. Here's one like, Colin Kaepernick must stand during the national anthem or he cannot be considered a patriot. It's got to be he's got to stand or he's not a patriot. There are no other things that he could possibly be under those circumstances. It's making this false set of choice or a false dilemma. Either you want to ban assault rifles or you don't care about children being shot. Once again, it's saying that there are only two positions you can occupy on this particular subject. And the world's more complicated than that. Finally, slippery slope. It's about a chain of events that they say are going to necessarily happen or in a very exaggerated use. And on valid uses, something like this, using junk food as an example. Kids are allowed to eat junk food when they're young. They'll never develop a taste for healthy food. Will end up eating junk food as adults. Okay, pretty good. And more susceptible to heart disease and diabetes. More susceptible, more vulnerable? Yeah, fair enough. But it's still making some leaps. But again, it's saying they're more vulnerable. The word never, it's really strong. Will likely never would make it probably a little bit more valid. Now you can click on this YouTube link to watch a commercial. It's basically saying that if you vote for Hillary Clinton, you're going to die in a home invasion. And once again, to get from that starting point to that end point is a huge leap of logic and therefore a fallacy. Appealing to false authority. It's basically when you put somebody who is in a position of authority to endorse something or to make an argument that really doesn't have any sense. More doctors smoke Camels than any other cigarette. Okay, great, but it doesn't mean that Camels are any healthier than any other cigarette or less likely to give you lung cancer. Dogmatism or appeal to tradition, this is a big one. This is the way we've always done things, therefore it's right. Therefore it's the only way they can be done. Here's an example. Marriage has traditionally been between a man and a woman, therefore gay marriage should not be allowed. You know, sometimes tradition works really well, but if that's the only reason you have, traditions change all the time. And there needs to be more to it than that. Some traditions are totally terrible. Think about all the traditions regarding lynchings in the South. People used to have picnics at them. That doesn't mean we should still have them because they were a tradition. Ad hominem is when you're attacking the character of a person rather than an argument. A personal hit, talking about somebody's sincerity or their intelligence or their lack thereof. Instead of talking about the argument, just saying, well, this person is stupid or this person is lame, instead of what that person is presenting in an argument. And we see this all the time. Sometimes people will say something like, don't vote for this candidate because they're an idiot. Okay, well, that's an attack against the person. And that's what homonym means, against the person. Instead, how about don't vote for this candidate because these policies are going to hurt you. All right, moving on along, trying to make this happen fast. Here's another example. I talked about that overlap a little bit. Post hoc, ergo propter hoc. Literally after this, because of this, if one thing follows another, it doesn't necessarily mean that that first thing caused the second thing. um, sometimes also called the correlation fallacy. In other words, correlation just basically means two things happened, but just because they happened doesn't mean the first one caused the second one. And you can hit this YouTube link if you want to see a fun Homer Simpson video. Here's a better one. A silly example of confusion between causation and correlation. Global average temperature versus number of pirates. Pirates are increasing. Okay. They're decreasing as we get closer to our present day, and the global temperature is rising. That means that pirates were causing the temperature to be stable. Therefore, by killing pirates, we are raising global temperatures. Obviously not true. These two things happened, but they're correlated, but it doesn't mean the elimination of pirates is what's sending our average global temperature higher. Again, it's a ridiculous example, but you see the point behind it. And here's another one. A lot of times people use the stock market too. And this one's a lot harder to prove as well. The stock market goes up and down, and sometimes that goes up and down with approval ratings of presidents or a certain policy, and sometimes it doesn't. It's much harder to prove causation. Now, equivocation is one of those twisting uses of words that makes you think that something is really something that it's not. I want to have myself a merry little Christmas, but I refuse to do so, as the song suggests, which is to make the Yuletide gay. I don't think sexual preference should have anything to do with enjoying the holiday. So I'm not going to have a Merry Christmas because it's saying have a gay Christmas. This person thinks that for that reason, there shouldn't be a Christmas celebrated for this person. Obviously, this person's homophobic, but also that's not what the word gay means there. Gay also means happy. We don't really use it that way much anymore, but you'll certainly find lots of examples of that in the past. Here's another example. Salad is healthy, and taco salad is a salad. Therefore, taco salad is healthy. Some taco salads maybe are, but a lot of them, are just drenched in sour cream and other dressings and have a lot of fat and chips and stuff like that. So, doesn't necessarily mean it's good. You know what? You can take Reese's Pieces and M&Ms, throw them together, call it trail mix, but that doesn't mean it's healthy. That also is equivocation. Now, straw person used to be called straw man, but the name has changed. And it basically means you're taking some form of an argument that's against your argument and making it ridiculous or weak to easily just shoot it down. And here you can click on a video if you want, basically saying that a certain candidate would support the rape and murder of young couples, and no candidate running for office would ever do such a thing. Red herring is something that's totally out of left field. In other words, it's a distraction. It doesn't have any relevance to what's at hand. Mr. Jones, I need an extension of my paper. Oh, Billy, why's that? I was out of town all weekend and then my car broke down last night. But didn't I assign this paper 3 weeks ago? So the car breaking down last night and being out of town all weekend, it's not really that relevant because there was all this time before then. Plan ahead. Don't leave it to the last minute. Finally, whataboutism is when somebody says what about and tries to throw something back in your face. How come I only got a C on my paper? Well, your paper was filled with spelling mistakes. But what about all the spelling mistakes in your PowerPoint slides? Putting back that what about doesn't take away from the fact that there are spelling mistakes in the student's paper and the student is the one being graded. And that wraps it up. up to time 15 minutes.